As the lights come up.
Boop. Boop. Frank's here. Frank's here. He's got lights. Hey,
Hi,
buddy.
everyone. I'm turning
Hello.
on lights so you can see me.
As you should. Yeah, because
Welcome to the show. Is anyone here, James?
we got a few people. We got a few people hanging out. It is a
Okay.
random Thursday night. It's 6:30. Clinton's here. We were just talking about you, Clinton, and your sweet swag.
Hello, hello. Yes, I was just checking it out. I wasn't aware that we even had 252 piece puzzles made. And so I was just quizzing James on where's mine. But he had no good answer for that one.
I only had one, so obviously I was saving it for someone special, and that was not you. So it was so on our Patreon. I should go over to
Ours, yours.
I mean no, it's a merge conflict
Oh, we have
FM
a
Patreon page.
that is ours. I thought you were gonna promote your Twitch one.
No. Okay, so when you go
Okay.
here, there's we're very publicly visible about how many patrons we have, how much money. Like a lot of the patrons, they hide it, right? They're like, oh, you can't see how much money we're
I see.
making. I like it visible. I got nothing to
Okay.
hide here, right?
All right.
So of this, there's some tiers. $2, you get to go. You get on our Discord, in which no, we open it up to everyone. I think now, right? And you get status in
Yeah.
Discord. Yeah.
Yeah. I just assume everyone is a patron and helping us out, James. I live in an idealized world.
Oh, are you? I can hear. Are you? Oh, you're lit. I was like, I can hear something in the
I'm
background.
fix I fixed it. I
Okay.
fixed it.
Okay. I
I'm
was gonna.
sorry,
Okay.
everyone, if you got an echo there.
I was like, wait a second. I was like, man, that's a bad echo. And then I was like, oh wait, no, that's just the. That's just the.
My bad.
Okay. So then you got the $10. You got $10, and you get some. Well, so you got $5. We'll send you some stickers and pins. $10 will send you even more stickers and pins. twenty
Well worth it.
dollars handwritten note. Did you send out all those notes? You did.
Yes, of course,
Okay. And then
James.
50 or more, there's a thing that says something incredible that we don't even know yet.
Is that like a 252 piece puzzle?
That is like a
I didn't know
252 piece
about that
puzzle.
one. I
Yeah.
did not know.
And there can only be 5 because we didn't think anyone would give us any money ever. Well, one in general. One, we
Oh,
never thought that anyone would listen to our podcast. And we also were pretty sure that no one would ever give us money.
well,
So,
you're creating scarcity, so you have to compete for those spots. That's what
yes.
it's all about. Yeah.
But we do want to thank everyone for all of your kind words and donations or hanging out in the chat room and the Discord, in which we never go into. But every once in a while we do.
Hey, we were really good in the beginning, but you're right. We've been a little bit bad.
Yeah.
It's the summer. I've been busy. Sorry, everyone.
The summer months. So yeah, so it's pretty awesome in general. We thank everyone, and that all just goes back in the show. We got upgraded equipment. Frank's got a new fancy arm. We're gonna get him a new fancy light if we keep doing streaming and stuff like that, which I think is great. So
I can just have little lights on my hat illuminating my face, like a space hat. Yeah. Next
uh,
IoT project.
yeah, but I do expect, Clinton, that we see that not only in progress. I just spilled coffee everywhere. In progress puzzle piece, and then like 6 years later, a finished product. And,
Yeah. Can I tell you a story about a Starship Enterprise?
oh yeah, go ahead, tell the story. I like the story.
This is a good story. James shows up one day with a gigantic box, everyone. Imagine a big box and then think a lot bigger. Almost refrigerator size. Let's go there.
Pretty big.
And he's like, I got you something, Frank. And I'm like, it's my apartment's not big enough for whatever you got me. And it ends up being this 2 million piece. Yeah, I think it's roughly 2 million pieces to put together the Starship Enterprise. Very classic Enterprise, very good looking, but also a lot of work. And
How many pieces was it?
I don't know. It's right up here, actually.
It's more of a the box is almost more impressive of the finished product.
I would get the box, but I totally know I'm gonna knock down a million things if I try. So we'll save that for the blooper reel or
Yeah.
something like that.
Ah. So it's
Well,
done, right?
it was
So
a lot.
that box is
No,
empty now, correct? Oh.
someday I will have, I think it's going to be like 6 feet long. I don't know. It's going to be gigantic if I ever finish it. Someday I'll have that consuming my entire living room so we can all worship the Starship Enterprise.
Starship Enterprise. That's right. Dan said that it doesn't look like I have a key light on. I did it before and after. So you can see my before and after here. Ready? So the key light's on.
After.
Key light is off.
Ooh, that's way too much glow from the beautiful sunny Seattle day.
It is I thought it was gonna rain a lot, so I didn't run my mic. Now, okay, so that is on natural. So here's daylight.
Natural's better.
Here's natural. Sometimes
That's
I'm feeling
color.
saucy. Here's cool. Here's 41. Here's 4100
No.
K. Here's
You need warm.
neutral. Here's warm.
Kind of folksy. I like the.
You have to balance the sunlight outside. Like if I was to close the blinds, then you could probably keep a consistent like in the dark. But I like the blinds open. I like to see movement, and there's like, you know, things and clouds and blue skies out there. So
I like how every one of our shows starts with production. We should just talk. Yeah.
Behind the scenes. Also, thank you for the bits. We got some free bits from Irazo. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I saw that in the video. That makes a whole sparkle effect. I don't get the sparkle effect in my silly setup here.
You don't. Yeah, although that would be cool. I guess, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I'm not, you know, I would need like a mixer, and I need things, and I need like a billion things to make it work, basically. But I'm just not that good. I do have a story to open up the podcast. What are we talking about? SwiftUI?
Yeah, we're totally talking about SwiftUI, folks. Two .NET developers are talking about SwiftUI. And this is going to be like another one in our series of things we know a little bit about, but we still have opinions.
That's right. So if you have any specific topics, this is kind of cool. We should do this when we're like, we don't know what we're talking about, which is all the time. We can say, what types of topics would you like to see?
What do you want to know about SwiftUI?
I mean, we won't know because we don't really know anything about SwiftUI, but we will entertain on the pod.
I know it's big. That's what I know.
It's a big deal.
I looked at it. Oh, okay. I just meant it was physically bite-sized big. If we're talking bits, it would take a lot of those.
Ooh, oh. Okay. This is are they distributing it as a library or part of the OS?
It's in the OS, baby. Shipping the UI framework right in the OS. That's why you have to upgrade. We'll save all this for the real show, but that's why you have to upgrade your Mac OS to use it.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is all very of interest to me, actually. Also, Airzo, I don't know how to say this guy or gal's name. So, but thank you for the subscription coming in
Twitch
with the
Prime.
That is with the Prime. You get a Twitch Prime subscription every month. I don't know if you knew this.
Nope.
And look at that. Like literally Nightbot comes in. Isaac. Okay, I'll just go with Isaac. Erazo.
Thanks, Isaac.
It's Isaac. You get one Twitch Prime subscription, and every month you have to renew though. It doesn't auto renew. You give it to somebody, and then they're like, whoa, awesome. And Amazon gives that person $3. And then I take any of the profits I make from the stream, and then I donate that to charity. And then Microsoft matches that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had it's Pride Month, and Gleam, which is our LGBTQ has like there's this thing called ERGs. You know ERGs, like they're like resource groups.
The rowing machine? No,
they're employee resource groups. And cool, yeah, go watch Kim. Maybe he'll rate us. Tell him to rate us later when he's done. Get out of here, Kim. So they had a bake sale today to support local LGBTQ organizations. So I saw this Rice Krispie treat. It was like some special salt or something on it. It's like, I want this Rice Krispie treat. and they're like, I was like, how much do I donate for this? And some people are like, $3, $2. I don't have any money, so you can just do it through our Benevity, our tool. And they're like, oh, it's whatever you want. And you can get some. So I was like, $100. That sound good? Like, sounds great. So it was actually $200.
But you just got one? How many did you get?
I got
You got
one.
a couple for $100. Just one?
They said I
should
could
have chipped
have
in another one.
They said I could have as many as I wanted at that point. I think I may have doubled or tripled the amount of donations, but it's
You
substantial.
take another one for a friend at least.
What they also had those, they had the Rice Krispie ones, but then they also had Fruit Loop ones. So I took one of those. So I did take two.
Okay, that's the
So,
truth came out. All right. That's cool.
yeah.
That's cool.
So the problem here is that everyone's going to leave because everyone wants to wait until Monday for the podcast.
Really?
You know what I mean?
No, I listen to podcasts twice. My favorite podcast, The Incomparable, they do a live show, and I listen to it unedited, and then it's fun just waiting around, waiting for the edited version to come out.
Yeah.
Now, I guess that's a difference. We don't edit that much, but whatever. Twice is just as fun.
At least you can stay for the pre and then the post, right? So you're like, all right, well, Frank and James usually talk for 30, 40 minutes. So I'll come back but leave your Twitch browser open. That's what's important, is open 100 tabs on all your phones so we get the viewership up. That's what's important.
Oh, is that what we're doing? Oh,
I mean,
I have multi-devices here,
Yeah, all the things. Well, so the thing is, if I want to become a partner, which will never happen, I would need 75 concurrent viewers average.
Constantly. Yeah. Wow.
No way. Let me see what my
So you have to have like entertainment on at night. Someone has to be watching at night. So you have to have like B-roll of Niagara Falls slowly pouring over with some heavy metal music playing in the background.
No, so here's what you got to do. And this is just criteria. You actually have to go through an approval process. But so within 30 days, you got to stream for 25 hours. That's pretty doable.
Sure.
That's like an hour a day, or stream.
And then
stream on 12 different days. I've done that already. But then you also need an average of 75 viewers, which is concurrent viewers, excluding hosts, raids, and embeds.
Wow.
So they actually have to be on your channel. And
Don't you be embedding those people.
My average is 27.85.
Wow. You got to triple it.
I would have to triple it. Never going to happen.
You can do it, James. You're a very likable person, and you have a lot of interesting things to say. Good luck, partner.
Nothing is impossible.
I just know I don't want to compete in that race at all. So I'm glad I'm bringing your numbers down. Bringing your average really low.
But you're bringing my hours up.
Oh.
We're doing this because I think it's fun. And there you go. Blounty says, Mr. Alex Blounty says, we have his vote for partner. Oh, you just Frank needs your vote more than anything.
What do I need? I don't want anything. I don't need anything, people. I just want to give.
Also, thank you for auto-hosting me, Blounty. I appreciate that. So, with one viewer, which is probably you, but that's great. So B Pelot says, I basically got the full backlog of podcasts to catch up on, so I'll still have a ton to listen to on Monday. And the important thing is that you listen to the backlog, you listen to the new ones, but then still download it again. That's the best part. Make sure that our numbers continue to rise.
Wow, you're such a player. Glad to have you on this team, Mr. Marketeer.
I mean, someone's got to do it.
That's true. I certainly am not.
Do you know how much marketing I do? Guess.
100%.
I say, Marco, how much money can I give you? Basically,
do we give him money anymore? I liked it when we were giving him money. It seemed like we were contributing to the ecosystem.
We're giving back to local developers. So Marco on Overcast.fm, you can buy ads. I have spent a lot of money. Holy crap!
Should be running my campaign, James.
I've probably spent $3,000 or $4,000 of money. $3,000. I want to. No, maybe about.
That's a lot.
20, maybe 22. No, that was a big one. I want to say
it's almost a half of a Mac Pro.
Yeah, maybe $2,500 I've given to Marco. Now this is advertising for VSpot, Nintendo Dispatch, Trinspo, and our podcast. On this podcast, 600. I've only done it twice ever, because the problem is the technology one is really expensive.
Oh yeah. So he did. I didn't know he did different rates. But that makes sense.
He does do different rates. Oh my God, the prices are ridiculous. He sold out of technology, but he's saying that If he had any slots left, $1,000 for 30 days.
Wow.
We paid $300.
Yeah. For
I
what's
can't.
our slot? Like religion?
No, technology.
Okay.
Religion and spirituality is $90.
Okay.
Um,
See, we could get into that. Philosophy? Let's do philosophy.
philosophy is that one. He doesn't have one for that. That might
Hmm.
be. Well, it's religion and
World
spirituality.
history. Oh, yeah, spirituality. We
Buddy.
could do that.
Games and hobbies are on there. That's not us. Arts? Are we arts? I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, it's an art. It's the art of computer programming, dude.
He will immediately like not make it happen. Okay, you ready? You ready to podcast?
Well, we haven't talked about any programming yet today, so I guess we really aren't.
We got an ad.
I guess we're going to now. We're
We
going
do?
to now.
We have a new
Yes.
sponsor. I'm going to surprise you with the sponsor.
Ooh, don't do that. I get names wrong.
Well, I mean, I'm going to do the.
I know.
Well, the thing is, so there's art, and then science is a different category too. Science and medicine.
I'm ready to take notes. This is gonna be a good one.
This podcast, all right. Let's see. What's the Twitter look like? Everyone's already left, so let's see.
Why they? That's not nice.
Well, the cool thing is if we keep going, then we can always we can then raid Kim if we're done early, so that'd be cool. All right. Let's record the pod. All right, this is pretty exciting. Talking about that Swift. All right, I'm going to say where's my
fruit?
I also have an opening story today too. I'm very excited about it. All right. Starting up.
Starting left. Starting
Twitch.
right. Would you like a countdown?
No. Clicked FM on Twitch. Our topic tonight is SwiftUI. I'll put it in all caps. Craig Federighi would be mad at me.
Code
SwiftUI.
first UI wins again.
Or does it? Look at David says, listen to that clickety keyboard. Yeah. Click, 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 click. It's soothing.
Should I run an Xcode beta while we're doing this? Yes, absolutely.
No. Close all the windows, Frank. How does your Zencaster look? It looks good? Looks good?
Oh, I don't pay attention. You know that.
All right, well, let me start there. I guess we're already live. That's the thing that's so funny. Okay, so let's start. All right, so mine looks good.
Recording. Looks like mine is... I look a little quiet. Am I quiet?
I don't know. I can't see your bar.
All right, whatever.
All right.
There's waves.
Okay, that's all that matters. All right. Here we go. Ready? 3.
Ready.
2. Frank.
James.
Right. There, here we go. I forgot what I was going to say to him. All right. 3, 2. Frank, it's official. My machine, my computer, my main development machine is falling apart.
Oh no. Is this the like one that you're always so proud of because it was very expensive? I think we did a whole episode on putting together our own machines. Is it that kind of machine or is it a laptop?
No, this is the home built machine. Now, it is not necessarily expensive when you compare it to a Mac Pro.
Oh, right. The bar has been set. You know, the best thing about the Mac Pro coming out is it's made me feel really good about my iMac Pro. I'm like, wow, I saved a lot of money.
You did. Except for the problem with the iMac Pro is that you can't really upgrade it, correct? You can put an external GPU.
Yeah.
But
I guess, yeah, but the external GPU I got is slower than the one built into it. The saddest thing that I realized was A, I should have got the faster GPU. B, I should have got a bigger hard drive. You know, you always think, I don't need that much hard drive. You need all the hard drive, every bit that you can get.
Well, if you remember, if you go back to Merge Conflict episode 82, when you bought I don't know if that's the version, the number of it, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
So if you go back to that episode, you'll remember me telling you that you should have spent more money on more RAM, more hard drive space, and just all the money. Give Apple all your money. That's the
Right. Yeah.
answer. Now,
The goal.
the goal is to give Apple all your money. Now, I will say this, Frank, at least the stand was included.
Yes. And actually it wasn't tall enough, so I stacked some books and put it on top of some books. It's perfect this way. Who needs a God, how expensive is it? 5,000 or 6,000?
The stand is 1,000.
I'm sorry, the stand is 1,000. I'm sorry. So the monitor would be like 7,000 with the stand. Yeah.
Correct.
So
Yeah, pretty
yeah.
much.
Well, because the stand, I assume you can't use it for any other monitor. But I do hope we'll have some good YouTube videos of people buying stands and just holding up amazing objects with it.
Creating their own stands. Well, I may need to get a new Mac Pro because I was doing some live streaming recently, and no one saw it because it was off film, but I hopped on to Skype, started up a Skype call, and all of a sudden, everything went out. All of my webcams. Right now, I have 2 webcams because we're actually live streaming this, but I have 2 webcams, one for you, one for Twitch. And everything went out, and my computer blue screened 100% in some error message that I have never seen before in my entire life.
Yeah. I thought they got rid of, or did they clean up, or did they improve the blue screen experience? How is the modern blue screen experience, James?
The modern blue screen experience is exceptional.
Okay.
Because probably
That's
an exception occurred on your machine.
Oh, see, I'm not good at puns.
In the kernel.
Wow.
In the kernel. So when you get it,
Ba-dum-bum.
there's a there's a frowny face. There's like something is going wrong with your computer. There's a QR code that you can scan that has the error code to a help page that will help you. And then what it does is it sits back and it collects a bunch of stuff from your machine, which who knows where that goes. I'm sure it gets reported somewhere to somebody at some time. And then your computer reboots. You don't have to wait until that's over necessarily, but you probably should. It seems like, I'm dog fooding my own product here. I work for the company, so I should probably do that.
Are you?
But
You're not running a beta Windows, I hope.
No.
Windows.
Just normal Windows. But here's what happened: is my computer turned back on. Of course, I didn't go to the help page, so I don't actually know if it was helpful at all. I assume maybe, possibility lower than average, right? Because there's so many errors that could go wrong. And I turned back on my computer, and none of my webcams are working at all.
Okay. So these are USB devices all just plugged into the back of this computer, or you got some complicated setup?
That's what you would think. Very close. And I'll make this a shorter story, but I have these beautiful monitors, and I said, well, these monitors have USB ports in them, but you need to do that crazy USB to USB. So I had 2 webcams plugged into a single monitor, and they weren't turning on. I was like, did I break the monitor or something? I don't know. So I plugged in a phone, and that didn't charge. I go, oh no. Like maybe it was something else. So then I took the webcam off and I plugged it into the front of my computer, and the webcam worked. And I was like,
I'm so excited, James. This means you're going to buy that $6,000 monitor. That's what this means. This is going to be the punchline. I'm way ahead of you.
Well, so it gets better because then I said, well, did I break the monitor? Like, what happened? So I take the USB cord that's in the back of my computer and I move it to the known working USB port on the front of my computer that I tested the webcam on, and everything starts working again. I blew the USB port that is in the back of the computer that's on the Mobo, but only a segment of it. Like, it's gone.
Great. Wonderful, James.
It's
Bravo.
Yeah. I don't know how I did it. So it's now I'm running webcams off of multiple USB ports, not all in the monitor. So I'm assuming that something like obviously terrible happened, and then boom, game over. And it just didn't know how to handle all of a sudden missing USB ports from the motherboard.
USB is simultaneously the best thing in the world and the absolute worst thing. So attached to this computer, I have 4 USB-A ports, 4 USB-C ports, something like that. Each one of those has a port expansion USB device attached to it. And those are all running off to 1,000 different devices and everything under the sun. And when something doesn't work, it's the worst. I literally had it today, too. I blew out my own USB hub. So look, we're both in good company with each other here.
USB. All right, well, that's my story, Frank, but I was listening to a little story from one of our best friends of the podcast, really true friend of the show, Mr. Craig Federighi. I don't know if you've heard of Craig Federighi at all.
Well, I know he just sends me emails all the time, so it's just I try to ignore him a little bit because I mean it just gets to be a little bit much after a while.
Yeah, he's a fan of your hats, so I get it. Trying to get that swag.
Darn good hat.
That's right. So I was listening to Mr. Craig Federighi on The Talk Show. I don't know if you know about Mr. John Gruber. He has a little podcast, it's just underground podcast called The Talk Show.
I feel a little bad because I missed that episode that you're referring to, but I was listening to the episode this week with Jason Snell, where they were reviewing the episode that you were listening to.
I haven't listened to that one yet.
James.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that one yet, but it is a very long, like 2.5 hour live show recording, so it's a different feel to it. But there's a lot. They cover all things from Apple, and we've been going through. We did our WWDC recap. We did iPad OS last week, which was a lot of fun. They talked a lot about that. And then they started to go a lot deeper into SwiftUI. And I've also been noticing a lot of people experimenting with SwiftUI. I know you've experimented with SwiftUI. It's not C#, it's not .NET at all, but it is mobile. And we like to talk about mobile stuff, and we can always contemplate if it should be C#ified or not. And there's an open GitHub issue, so maybe someone's doing something, no inside baseball. But I wanted to start with SwiftUI this week from a perspective that you and I are not Swift/SwiftUI masters. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There was a point in my life where I loved the language spec. It's the same thing that what actually got me first into C# was it was the first well-written language spec I'd ever written. I think Apple did a really good job with theirs too, and so I got kind of interested in it. But I only know the language from that kind of like, I read a book on it, academic perspective. Technically, I've written a couple libraries in it, but constantly Googling and Stack Overflowing the entire time that I do. So I can technically write some Swift code, but I am not at all fluent in any imaginable way.
I can read the Swift code. I've been reading.
Sure,
I've been Googling quite a bit. I've been getting really into some iOS APIs recently, and some of the libraries I've been creating. So I've been doing a lot of Stack Overflowing, and I'm seeing a lot more of here's the Objective-C, here's the stable Swift ABI stuff, and it looks it's not my super cup of tea, but it's a lot better than the Objective-C from what I've seen and some of the niceties there. So I actually like the Swift itself. Some of the nice things that it does, right? And we've talked about the different languages. I like some of the stuff F# does. I like the stuff C# does a lot. I like some of the stuff that Kotlin does. I like you can always like a little bit, but I don't know if mashing all of those together into a single language would be a good idea. But I do like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But it's crazy because with Swift itself, they've always just sort of that's the new language you're coding it with. But you're still coding against UIKit or AppKit or WatchKit. WatchKit? WatchKit UI?
WatchKit? Yeah, Watch OS. I don't know. Let's go with WatchKit. WK, WatchKit.
WatchKit. Yeah, and tvOS is UIKit. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. You got it. AppKit for Mac. Did you say that one?
AppKit. Yeah. So with this, you're just coding against those APIs, but Swift UI, different.
Yeah. I really appreciate what I forgot who was presenting. Never mind, I'm not going to give a name. But one of the presenters at the keynote said something like, we have this new language, but we're using these old libraries designed basically for Objective-C. And as we all know, coming from a .NET C# background, the languages influence the library design, the APIs, how things are expressed this way and that. And they said, maybe it's time that we have a new UI library tailored to the language, take advantage of all the features of the language, which is pretty neat because Swift has some awesome features to it. I think it's kind of a little bit of an ugly language, but it's cool because it's up there with Rust and Go of being very efficiently compiled. Still not, Go is a garbage collected language, but Rust isn't. So Swift and Rust are playing kind of in this interesting playground of being native compilation like that. Anyway, Yes, they did a whole UI thing, and I think it's really interesting. Because like I said, it's like let's see how we can take advantage of the language, and in fact, they even changed the language a bit to make parts of this UI. I almost called it a UI kit. Can't call it that. Make part of Swift UI work. So gonna we're gonna have some fun here. Let's dive into it a bit.
Yeah, and I was talking to some Apple developers recently, and that had been experimenting with Swift UI, and they were like, "Oh, it's really intriguing," and they didn't really know too much about Xamarin. And I
Okay.
said, "Well, what's they're like, I was explaining to them, well, what's unique about Xamarin is that you have UI kit, you have app kit, you have storyboards." And I go, the funny part is that when you think of cross-platform libraries, like what Xamarin Forms did, at least for iOS, Android, Windows, it says we just abstracted, but it's still the same thing under the hood. And what Swift UI does, and everyone first came out and thought it was like just a shim wrapper over UI kit, but it's really not necessarily that. From what I'm getting is that there is a button, or there is a stack, or there is a label, or whatever the different names of the controls are. It's a control it's a whole composition frame. It's a composition animation. It's a framework, right? The difference is that from what I can tell and what I've read and heard is that, yes, you run that maybe on an iPhone and you may get a UI table view, but you may run that on a tvOS device and you may not get a UI table view. You might get a new implementation under the hood that makes sense for a tvOS device. So it may be something new that's not in UI kit. So it's like you're either going to get the thing underneath that could be a UI kit or an app kit version. You don't know, right? You don't really care, but you might get something new that's part of Swift UI.
Woo! Lot said there. So I think the comparison to Xamarin Forms is the best way to look at it because, as you said, yeah, it's doing these tricks. So sometimes labels a label, sometimes it's not, and you're really not supposed to care or know because it's a high-level UI language. I almost call it a language API, but it's written well enough. It almost seems like a language in parts. So I think it's fun how we can break it down in so many ways. We can look at it, what platforms does it run on? What controls does it have? How does it do data binding? How do you specify user interfaces? How do you customize those user interfaces? So there's so much to cover when it comes to like a new UI framework because it is interesting and new. So I want to start. I find it interesting the cross-platformness, but to me that's just hard work. We know how to do cross-platform. You just write interfaces and then deal with the implementation. It's a pain, but it can be done. I think the more interesting things are the animation support, the data binding, and the editor that they came up with for it.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, to me, it is nice that it runs on a lot of different platforms, and their motto though is better apps, less code. And
Mm.
I'm not, I'm not 100% sure that that's what will actually happen. I mean maybe less code than UI kit, but maybe not. I want to believe, but when I look at a very simple, like here's a list, right? There's instead of UI table view, it's a list, and you have this model thing, which we can talk about more. It's this different pattern, but you have an image, and you give it an image, and there's some text, but like that's just going to give you the default stuff. Like I want to see the full examples of here is let me see the podcast app code. You know what I mean? If that is Swift
Yeah.
UI, which I don't know. I know it is Project Catalyst, but if that is a Swift UI app, I want to see it, and like same thing with Xamarin Forms. Like I can go in and I can write a list of data that's a few lines of code. We've
Yeah.
done that's what you do on a marketing site. But
Yeah.
when you go look at real apps, like here's all of the styles and all of the things that cascade on top of it, and you get into the code, it is larger, and that's always been my fear of fear in a way, a fear of a declarative UI, which I know that you're a little bit more of a fan of than me. Is how does that scale and how does that refactor in production? Not and maybe you can talk a little bit more about supplementing my fears of moving away from any XML base, right? Because Android XML is based, storyboards are more WinFormsy in a way, but that's kind of my long term. How does it scale?
Well, I think what you're saying is I don't know why people love those designer things, XAML and storyboards, any of that stuff. It all should just be in code. And so I'm actually a big fan of this approach. It's how I honestly write my own UIs, my own apps. And so I think the fact that they went with a code first approach is kind of like it's a boon for me. It's like, good job, Frank. Code first. That is the right way to go. But you're right. It's not for everyone. Obviously, there are people that absolutely love separating out what the design, the declarative part of what the UI looks like versus the data backend of it. For me, I'm just trying to write apps, and I don't mind mixing those layers very much. But they're definitely mixing them. We are definitely doing, database access on button handlers here a little bit. You can create abstractions on top of it, of course, but at the low level, like you said, they keep showing these trivial examples. So it's like, okay, good, nice trivial example, but how do services work? How does the event mechanism work for those? All that stuff. I'm not sure it's going to be less code either. We should talk about the data binding and the animation. I think that's actually where we'll save code, but as for setting properties on a text box, no, you gotta say, color and a color, you just have to somewhere.
Yeah, I could do a squiggly background color equals this color, or I could do dot color equals this color. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like that much different of code. I don't quite understand in general. I mean, so let's talk about then what you're saying is some of maybe the advantages of this declarative UI, which is perhaps the animation system and the data binding mechanism. That seems to be, if it's not less code, and maybe you prefer all of your code is in one file versus multiple files. That could be a fight and battle. But one thing I do struggle, I'll say, with all XML, whether it's Android or XAML that I've done in Silverlight or WPF or UWP or Xamarin Forms, is animations. Data binding, sometimes like simple data binding, sometimes complex. You got to figure out weird syntax. Is it this parent property and this binding and this thing? I just want to shove it together. But so how does it actually simplify that in a way, or make it better, or make it worse?
So the two mechanisms are combined, the binding system and the animation system. I think that's what kind of makes it comfortable from that first standpoint, is that there's a lot of implicit stuff that can happen, or at least if not implicit, then it's setting a property to true or saying, do this thing, and then the rest is done for you. I think that's always been my complaint with the XAML UI frameworks, Forms included, is animations are explicit for the most part. You have to create them yourself. You have to think them through, do this and that. Whereas even in UIKit, there are a lot of implicit animations, or at least easy to do implicit animations just by wrapping something in a block or something like that. I love how easy they make it. But they tried to make it even easier with this SwiftUI thing. So when you're doing your data binding updates, you can say, oh, I'm going to set this right now, but at the same time, animate it while I set it. And so you get this going on and that going on. Then perhaps you'll say this animation might take 2 seconds, but then what happens if the data changes in between those 2 seconds? Have you ever done that in one of your apps, James? You add 2 animations to the same control?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And then sometimes you might want it to bounce a little bit, and you might want it to fade a little bit. And you want it to cascade in a way.
Yeah, and the problem is you try to put all those things together in the code, but then it's not always easy to put them together in the code. Sometimes it happens on this event handler, sometimes on that event handler. So just orchestrating all that stuff is complicated. Now, nicely, just from their architecture, which we'll get to eventually, this kind of falls out of it because they can see this animation should be active. This one just got canceled by that one. And so with just a few... they do that chaining kind of thing where you say, oh, create this object, set the color to blue, dot, set the tech font to this, dot, set the width to this, dot. It's kind of like that kind of chaining of
Mm.
doing things.
Yeah, there's a good one in here which I see is so there's an image, for instance, which they have a few animations built up. So I mean, it's pretty interesting. So you have an image, and the idea is that you may want to rotate it 90 degrees, and then you may also want it to scale from either like 1 to 1.5 or something. So you can say, here's my image dot rotation effect, and then in this instance that you give it a degrees, and then there's like logic inside of it, which is show detail, do 90, else 0, and then the same thing for scale effect. If show detail is true, do 1.5, else do 1. And that obviously has to do with the MVU model, the state model of it, because there's a simple Boolean. So whenever you change that Boolean, it reevaluates in which that animation then applies. So you're not having to say, when the Boolean changes, go do this. It's more like in a weird way, like a visual state manager, which is like very verbose. I'm not a huge visual state manager. But
Yeah.
in that instance, you can say, when this happens, go do this thing. But here it's kind of seems like it's cascading off of the creation of the object or the UI.
Yeah, and I think that that's the most, and I'll use this word specifically, powerful feature of this library is that it's saving you code. So when we were saying less code before, we were debating whether it was less code before. We were talking about setting up the UI.
Yeah.
But when it comes to these more complicated interactions, you said it yourself, Visual State Manager, it's a wonderful concept. I have an implicit concept of it in most of my UIs because we all have different modes and different states the UI can be in. But it's just so verbose that I hate to use it and I don't remember how to use it. I don't remember the syntax. This is shorter syntax, therefore you can take advantage of it and use it more often. I think that's what excites me. I know I've mentioned in this podcast before, but it's probably been years. The thing I always feel most guilty about in my iOS apps is not having enough animation. And so, because they make it pretty darned easy to add animation to your apps now. And then with this, it's trivially easy if you buy into their architecture.
Yeah, and I'm always curious what could like the forms team do, because the thing is, what's people don't know about forms, which like I always look at my own apps and I'm like, why? How come my apps don't have more animations? And then I'll see like Kim do something, or like Brandon will create an app and there's all these animations, in it and in forms app. I'm like, what? How come? Because they're just like, well, I just think about being okay with putting like different kind of go-to statements almost in a way, like apply this animation, apply this grouping of animations, and when you tap on something, play this animation and it scales out, or when this fades in, go left and right. But that has to happen in a different file, right? It's not in the file. So that's one thing that I'm curious what the teams could do there. It's always been a challenge for me, even in Android world and inside of iOS world, because there's in a storyboard and then there's the code behind, and then I gotta think about it afterwards. So that's something I'm interested in. But let's talk more about the architecture and how it goes. But let's first thank our amazing sponsor and brand new sponsor this week for the pod, our good friends over at Clubhouse.io. Now, maybe you never heard of Clubhouse.io, but hey, listen, are you looking for a better way to track your product and engineering backlog? We're building apps all the time. We have huge backlogs. Like, do you want a product management tool that's powerful and simple to use? Like, literally, who doesn't want the power and simplicity? Then really, you should give Clubhouse a try. Now, I've been trying out Clubhouse, really super cool thing. It's really just software and product management designed for software engineers and software teams. Like, you're an engineer, you want to manage your product and your backlog. This thing is built for you. What's really nice though is that not only do you get kind of like your boards with like ready and development, dragging, dropping, you can set different project types. You can look at unfinished, your stories, your epics, your milestones, all the things. You can get burned down charts. You can kind of go as much or as little as you could possibly want. But the nice thing is that they also have a full REST API. Everything's there. And of course, just like anything out on the internet, there's tons of integrations to all the things that you could possibly want. Now, as a special offer for Merge Conflict listeners, you can get a free 2-month trial. 2 months for free. Go to clubhouse.io/merge conflict. That's it. Clubhouse.io/merge conflict and give them a try. And thanks to Clubhouse.io for sponsoring this week's pod.
Thank you, Clubhouse. And thanks for introducing that one, James. I have to go check them out. You kept that one back from me. I didn't know about this.
Secrets. That's what I do. That's what I do. Okay, so now if I want to take
architecture,
let's talk
baby. We gotta do architecture. Can we finally do it?
So do I have to put in the show title, do I need to put something about architecture and SwiftUI? And then really, whenever people see the word architecture in one of our podcasts titles, it's like the most popular podcast ever. So SwiftUI architecture for developers.
SwiftUI architecture with taste.
I love it. Okay.
So this is classic. Let's say roughly the SwiftUI architecture is that functional reactive programming stuff that we've talked about before, where you're given some data and your job is to write a function that translates that data into UI. So if I have a list of monkeys, I guess, I create a what are they called? Oh my God, I don't know. What's the Xamarin Forms vertical stack called? Stack layout.
I knew it. I wanted to let you figure that one out, Frank.
Right. I could create a stack layout. I could create a bunch of sub views, some children views for it, put some images in there, and I can write a function that generates all that. The problem is, if one of those monkeys were to ever change, it would be terribly inefficient and other problems. But to call that function again, recreate the UI, redisplay the UI, it would just be bad. So their whole thing is solving that problem of, we like to be able to write that one function that generates the UI because it's so simple. It makes creating UIs very easy. You take full advantage of all the power of the programming language. But how do you actually get it to update in an object-oriented world?
Yeah, that's always been the struggle. Well, in the terms of most like apps that I build, I have some MVVM architecture, and things are changing and UIs are changing, and I can do data binding back and forth to say this thing, when this Boolean changes, then hide this thing or make it visible, and then the UI just updates magically for me. That's like mostly what I want to do. And I think of the view model as it's not a representation of like the UI stack though. It's a representation of, I guess it's the model of the view. It's the view model. It's in the name, Frank.
I think that you're overthinking the name. Can I give you a higher level look at it?
Yes.
The way that we generally achieve data binding in Forms and in .NET is we create reactive observable objects that mutate state. Yeah. We are object-oriented programmers.
Yes.
So whether you have a view model, whether you have a model, it kind of doesn't matter. You have an object out there that has iNotify property change on it, basically. It's expected that you'll always have that one object, and its internal state will change. Its properties will change, and its lists and things like that. This model, the way React works, the way Elmish works, Fabulous, the way SwiftUI works, is that they don't have reactive objects like that. Instead, they just take a value approach to it and say, in general, when the person object, not the person value changes, then we'll regenerate the whole UI. Whenever values change, not objects, not with internal state, but just big hunking value things. Try not to use the word object. It's hard.
Well, you have this then sort of class, if you will, of state for your app. And we talked about MVU a little bit in the past and a bunch of reactive stuff. But you have this sort of state, and it may not be everything that the UI is displaying or doing or whatever. It's just like, this is stateful things that mutate that the UI needs to know when to update. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes, but I think that applies to both the reactive object-oriented world too, because it's that The biggest thing here is I probably should have used this word earlier is immutable.
Hmm.
These value objects don't change. They don't, their internal state doesn't change. So if you have a large hierarchy, a list of people, and the person has an address, and an address has a street, and the street is an object, and you want to mutate that street in an object-oriented world, you set the property on it.
Yep.
And then if that thing is in a UI somewhere, it'll bubble up event, bubble up an event, bubble up an event. That works pretty well. It's a tiny bit efficient if you're setting a million properties on a million things because you're going to bubble up all these events, but whatever. Computers are fast. Doesn't really matter. This model's a bit different. I would have that list of people, each with an address with a street. If I want to change a street, then I have to change that address. I have to create a new address thing. I have to create a new person thing. I have to create a new list of people thing. I have to keep. I'm not bubbling up an event. I'm bubbling up a new data, new immutable data. It's a different tact. It's a million events versus one event. The problem is you have fine-grained control with reactive objects, but with immutable objects, it's not fine-grained because they're big and have lots of data in them.
Well, I think the real there's two differences I'm seeing already is that bubbling events that you're saying and how it knows how to update the UI. But you're saying that what I've noticed in the Swift UI code that I've seen and experienced, and the Fabulous code that I've seen before too. If people don't know what Fabulous is, it's F# with Xamarin Forms in a React MVU. It's an MVU style, very similar to this, of constructing UIs and reloading. But there's always this like one method to sort of build your UI in general,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing where you be like, hey, like don't try to do other, like this is where you build it, like this is where it goes. It's very
Mm-hmm.
prescriptive in a way, so you're not generating a bunch of UI in other places. Like, no, this is where it happens, and this is where you inflate it.
Yes, but it's still a programming language, so you have functions, James.
Sure.
You and
Oh
you
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
different objects.
Of
So
course.
I worry that people are thinking you're going to throw this all into one single file. No, the whole idea here is that programming languages have abstraction. They have very powerful tools for doing algorithmic work. And so we should be using that to build our UIs, not relying on a whole different language with its own semantics and
Yeah.
its inability to do logic and things. Anyway, Fabulous is actually a good comparison to Swift UI. In a lot of ways, Fabulous is a UI API for F sharp. It's tailored pretty well to F sharp to make the syntax work out very nicely in that. And it's also cross-platform. The difference is in the details. Exactly how is that state distributed? When do things get updated? Obviously, the programming language, all that. But let's stay on the architecture side. I think the nicest innovation that Swift UI did was they gave you a way to organize the state and decide what is a reference to some data and what is the data itself. And so their binding system is explicit. You say when you're binding to an object and you get a binding object back. And that's because they want to be very clear that this is not the data itself. This is just a mirror of it.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed in the keynote, or maybe it was a developer deep dive, they were talking about these bindable states and the states themselves and the mutation of them. And they go, and this is something that I took back to my own project when I looked at my source code, is they're like, oh, you would be really surprised of how often, or actually, sorry, not how often, but how little your objects mutate. Like, honestly, you have, if you looked at your entire app, like of your model, and like how much of it is ever mutating after you create it. Maybe if you're editing a person, but if you just have a list of people, that stuff is never changing. Maybe your app never changes that data. So why would you create sort of the bindable parts and pieces of it? And why, even in my code, do I have set properties that are doing comparisons of values and doing a bunch of extra stuff? Because it's been ingrained in my head. That's what I do. But, if I looked at it again, I go, oh, maybe I don't need to set up this complexity on every single object unless I'm actually going to change the value.
Yeah, reactive objects are kind of viral. Once you have one property that is observable, you're like, well, I might change the other, I might change the other. The problem is you don't know which ones you're ever going to change in the future. And so you end up having all that extra crud. But I appreciate what you said about how changes over time are actually minimal. This is completely how we works, my web UI library. When it's communicating, a Wii app is always communicating with a server, whether it's off on a different computer or whether it's a web, what's it called, WebAssembly thing.
Hmm.
All it's ever doing is communicating those differences. And that's why it can work so well because they're actually quite rare. We rarely mutate our UIs once we've presented it in front of the person. And I think that's why we all just kind of, at least myself, enjoyed the idea of that's why I just want to write a function because obviously I'm just going to show it once.
Yeah.
And darn it, it's annoying when data changes on you and you're like, ah, how am I going to update this thing?
Yeah. Well, there seems like there's a lot of good, but I want to talk about sort of the other trade-offs that we have here because you and I were talking before we did the pod, and I said, well, now the Swift ABI, what is the ABI architecture?
Application binary interface. And it's the binary part that makes things native in scare quotes. We, as .NET programmers, live in a glorious managed world. Managed usually means the fact that we use a garbage collector, but it also means that we distribute our binaries not tied to a machine. We ship IL code around to each other.
Yep.
And that means that we can have cross-platform libraries pretty easily. But Swift is totes a native compile all the way down language. Technically, it can go to LLVM intermediate language. We've talked about that before, but that's still a pretty low level thing. It's still kind of tied to a machine. And so you have this problem of Swift has to be compiled into a binary on every platform and distributed on every platform.
Yeah. And I then said, okay, well, Swift has a stable ABI. And then I said, well, what about SwiftUI? Are they distributing this as a library? Like a Cocoa Pod, if you will? And you said, nay, they are not distributing it that way. That's not how that works, James.
No, instead, in classic Apple style, it's a built-in framework right down at the OS level. You need to install for yourself OS Catalina and iOS 13 if you want to be using this library. Now, I'm curious if that'll stay true forever. Like, you feel like they should backport it to older iOSs, but Apple's not really a backporting kind of company, so maybe not.
Well, and this happened to be sort of the downside of Swift in the early years, which is it didn't, you had to ship it in your app actually for a while because there was no stable
That's
ABI.
good. Like we're doing that with .NET Core now. I'm
Yeah.
all for ship the runtime right in the app because then you're not dealing with system level stuff.
That's how Xamarin works. You have the .NET runtime. You ship it with your app. It works.
Yeah.
And that version can use C# features with it. And yeah, so I guess that actually then wasn't that bad because your app, which maybe against Swift 1 could ship, be totally fine.
Yes.
There's different performance issues there.
Sure,
right?
but I think that they made the right decision because they knew that they were going to be changing the language quickly. Yeah. So tying it down at the OS level, we can talk about Microsoft history too with .NET 1 and .NET 2, like problems with tying runtimes down to the OS level. It creates issues. And so Apple was smart there, but not so much for this UI framework, though.
Yeah, and I'm imagining that there's things that are built into the operating system itself, just at the level of UIKit, in which that this stuff is needed, or even AppKit for that matter, if they're making any changes there. So it's built into it. So if you want to start this development, you're going to have those OSs install those betas. And then I'm imagining, though, and I couldn't imagine any other way of working, is that if you build a SwiftUI app, you can't ship it to iOS 12. It has to be an iOS 13 only feature, correct?
Yeah, as far as I understand, I wish we were wrong, but when I was trying to do some SwiftUI development, I had to go install Catalina. and it destroyed my computer for like a few weeks. So, as far as I know, yes, that's the price to pay, which is good and bad. The good means that they did have that cross-team relationship. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, if they had to change AppKit, if they had to change UIKit to make this thing run well, we already know they had to change the Swift programming language a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to make this thing run well. So I imagine that went across to the other teams too. And that's good from an app developer's perspective. That means that they're trying to deliver a better library. It's also bad because as an app developer, it limits the amount of people that I can distribute it to.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine a world where, you know, like even and like React Native, Flutter, Xamarin, they come out and they say you can only use this on iOS 13. You know, like, oh, here's
I
here's all these new controls. You can only use this on iOS 13. Like, I just don't think that that would be a thing, because if SwiftUI comes out with new controls in iOS 14, then you can only use those new controls on iOS 14. Because again, you don't backport like Android. Google got something right. They backport all of their controls into mega libraries. For better or worse, Google did something right with Android.
I'm not going there.
Ah, come on.
Earlier when you're like, oh, I was doing animation on Android, I'm like, you can do animation on Android.
Of course, it's in a compat library. It's all in a compat library. All of the libraries, Frank. No.
I was also thinking, I get upset at the Xamarin team because the Xamarin Mac minimum deployment target is 10.9 now for Mac OS. And now I'm thinking, well, at least it's not 10.13 because oh my God, at least they're at least going 4 years, 5 years, whatever.
There you go.
Back compat, it's hard. No one wants to do it. So I guess I should stop being grumpy when people force me to move on with versions.
Well, and so the longevity of it is, if you're going to create a new app now, I don't think you can use it,
Um,
right?
what are you talking about? Swift
If
UI?
yeah, I mean, Swift UI, like, if you okay, so here was the
I would do
always,
it.
you would do it now and only target iOS 13.
Yeah, iOS has enough uptake that if your app is going to be at all successful,
Mhm.
there's enough people running iOS 13 or will be that you'll be fine. So 100% new app, I would do it, especially because I don't know if we've been clear. It's good. They did a
Yeah.
great
Oh
job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This library, I don't think we've praised it enough. It is far better than programming UIKit.
Yeah.
UIKit is not the nicest thing on the planet.
Well, it's going to have to come down to your business requirements, and this is sort of the integral part, right? So
Right.
I still have developers in my libraries asking for iOS 9 support for iPad 2.
Exactly.
So
Right. Different demo, right. Are you going to a consumer market or are you trying to satisfy businesses that won't upgrade or users that won't upgrade? It really depends on your market. And
yeah,
that's the reason I have back compat too, back to 10.9, because I have stats showing that people with older OSs are using my apps.
yeah, I see devices that are not getting updates, right? And is iOS 13, iPhone 5, I don't think is getting iOS 13. I think 5S is, I believe.
That would make sense because you want a 64-bit one at least. I'm surprised they're still doing the 5S. That's getting old, that one too.
It's getting up there. So, I mean, there are the trade-offs there. So, I mean, this is the same problem I think that the Swift stuff had for a while. Like, you took the trade-off of the app size versus whatever, and that a lot of people were like, oh, I'm going to stick with Objective-C for a while, and then I'm going to start mingling, and then I'm going to go all in, right? And it's the same thing we see with basically anything, and that's new, and that's everything is new and shiny and awesome, right? Like, everyone's like, I'm going to do .NET Core, and then like, all right, now we're at .NET Core 2, and then 3, like, okay, now we're all in, right? It takes some time to move along, but it is fun to play with things while they're brand new and shiny, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't write, I'm sorry, you can write tons. You could probably write 80% of all apps in this thing right now. But the kind of apps I write, I can't write in it. So I won't actually get too many advantages from using something like Swift UI because I do graphical apps that have a lot of touchy kind of interactive things that happen. And so there's still going to be time. We don't have SceneKit running on there. You don't have any 3D engines built into it. So it's a baby framework, but it's really fantastic out of the gate. And honestly, I'm a little bit jealous of all the Swift people getting to take advantage of it. So good
And
job, Apple.
yeah, and as people explore with it, and I see it, it's again, it'll be when it comes out fully, like if people will be able to take advantage of it and build the things they want to build. And that's always any problem of anything new is
Yeah.
it has, this is what it does, and then developers, aka us, I would like everything, please. Can I just have everything right now? Give it to me. So
Yeah.
that's what I'll see. I'll be interested in.
Yeah, and rumor on the street is that Apple is going forward with this thing. This is not some baby pet project or anything like that. They're serious. They're hoping that this will be used. We've mentioned this on the last episode. They're trying to unify their platforms from the watch to the phone to the pad to the what are they going to have, an ankle bracelet or something next year, you think? Yeah.
Well, and the funny part and the best part, not even funny part, the best part is that this will maybe, whether it was declarative or not, this will get rid finally of the one thing that I absolutely hate about iOS, Mac, Watch, and tvOS development.
Storyboards?
Yes, they are the worst. They are
Yes,
literally the worst thing ever created. I hate all of them. I mean,
they're XML.
No, they're not They are XML, but they're not XML. If you're gonna make it XML, make it XML. I'll be very happy. But when nibs, all these new developers don't even know what nibs are. Those zip files, those nib files came out. It was like, we've always mentioned, because we're old timers now at this point, my 3.5 iPhone with 480 by 320. When I was developing for these, it was amazing. It's just like, here it is. So that was a little bit okay. And then all of a sudden, as things progressed, and now we're worried about all the different resolutions, the notches, the iPad OSs, the split screens, and like what is that thing called for the different screen sizings?
Oh, I know what you mean. And now you made me forget it because you didn't know it. But size classes.
Those
things. Yeah.
Ugh, terrible.
It's all good, man. I've been writing some new apps. It's good. Feels good. I updated an old app. Felt good. I love UI frameworks. My favorite old one was Shoes from Ruby. I love these things, and so I'm just excited by all this. And I hope that we'll steal some ideas from them for our UI frameworks.
Yeah, I like as things evolve. Now, I will say this before we get out of here. I was listening to this podcast. I'll put it in the show notes. If you have 3 hours to kill, listen to this talk show episode. That's basically any talk show episode, by the way. I've now moved, by the way, to 1.2x on my podcast player.
Ooh.
Up from 1.1. Pretty excited about it.
I was a 2 to 3 person for a time.
That's impossible. I don't know how
you can train yourself. It's fun.
Trained a neural network. So I will say one thing that I didn't know that happened that is inside of I guess it's new iPad OS / the new Mac OS is a feature called Sidecar. Now, I know Sidecar already. Sidecar, you can take a Mac and it extends your Mac OS, or an iPad and extends your Mac OS. But did you know that when you do that, it will put your touch bar onto your Mac or onto your iPad screen?
Touch bar? You mean I'm finally going to have to start writing touch bar support into my apps? That's insane. I've been completely ignoring that piece of technology forever. Darn it.
Yeah, so they were saying they'll put the touch bar onto your iPad. Now, the funny part is that iPad is not a touch screen. You can't touch it when it's in sidecar mode, but you can use an Apple Pencil to interact with it as a mouse.
I'm so confused. You're joking.
No.
That last bit about the touching, that's not a joke?
That's not a joke.
Oh my God.
But
okay.
You would think that they would, what the best part would be is like if it, because a Mac is not a touchscreen device, but it would be, they said they didn't do it, but I'd imagine the touch bar, it's in the name. But here's what's really cool about this, okay? If you build an app and you build touch bar support for it, and your users are using like a MacBook or a MacBook Air or something that doesn't have a touch bar, and they use Sidecar, your touch bar shows up on the iPad still.
I love it. I can't wait. I'm sidecarring everything.
Sidecar
I'm
for
so
life.
sad though because I've totally avoided programming for it. I guess I read the docs once, but I never implemented any code.
You got to do it. All right. Well, anything else from you on this? We've gone way too long.
No, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it over the next couple of years. I
Yes.
mean, you should start using it at SwiftUI version 2. Skip the first version. It's always the roughest.
If you're a Swift developer. Yeah. And you
Oh, we
love
didn't
Swift.
we didn't talk about the editor at all. That's a super hot editor, but we'll talk about it some other time, or
Yeah.
we'll just make allusions to it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for sticking with us in this conversation today. I'm excited about stuff. I love when things evolve and things change. It just drives, ideas more than anything. So yeah, we'll see what you can do with your Wii application, and then you can make it all crazy and declarative and awesome.
Yeah, declarative and awesome. I'm running my app like that right now. It's going well.
All right, I'm
I'll let
excited.
you know in a few weeks.
All right, I've seen continuous, so I know how you build your apps, Frank. It's crazy. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for sticking in with us. Of course, you can find us everywhere on the internet at James Montemagno, at Proclarum. The podcast is at Merge Conflict FM. You can also go to mergeconflict.fm. You can subscribe. You can do all the things. You can check out show notes. You can click on the things. You can rate us in Apple Podcasts. We would love that. And if you're already on what is the new version of Mac OS called? Not Catalyst, but also Katana.
Catalina.
Catalina. If you're on that, you can use the new podcast app and rate us from your Mac. Now, how cool is that, Frank?
I love that it's an iPad app running on the Mac. The future is now.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's podcast. Until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for listening.
Peace. Boop.
And watching, everyone. I guess I should say that now, huh? Thanks for listening.
Oh,
and watching.
And watching. It's a secret.
Is anyone still watching?
Yeah, 17 people. All-time high.
People.
See.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. I meant to comment on the I said they're unifying the platforms, and like someone said, but they're splitting iPad OS and iOS. I'm like, oh, it's just marketing. It's just marketing.
They talked about that on the podcast too. It was a good one, yeah. Thanks,
okay.
Thanks, Pelauto. Thank you for the kind words. People love the show. That's good. I enjoy some real time feedback. I don't know. Do you watch the chat at all, or like when I'm talking, or no?
Yeah, I did, but not completely. I missed a lot of lines. It's too far away and the font's too small. I gotta hook up the iPad next time.
There you go. I like that. Yeah, do that. And I'll be curious what the Twitch iPad app looks like.
I think I've used it before. That's usually how I watch Twitch. I feel like for some reason, like watching Twitch on a desktop computer. I don't know. I feel guilty, and yet if I'm on an iPad, I don't feel guilty. Gotta really think about that.
Yeah. Oh my. All right, I'm gonna go eat some dinner. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Let's we can go. I'll stick around for a little bit. I'm gonna raid Kim because he's still alive. He's building some apps. We can go over. I'll put in our Zencaster so you can open it up and you can start heckling it. But we'll do a raid. So everyone's hanging out. We're gonna do end of stream, but hang out. We're gonna raid Kim in like literally, 60 seconds or whatever. And then we'll if you're a subscriber, throw a bunch of subscription monkeys and coffee and raids over his way. He's got a cool setup. He's got a Pikachu, so that's exciting. So we'll see how that goes. But let's go do it. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Frankie, thank you so much for being amazing.
Bye everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye.